Hey everyone, Jeff here, also known as the Revit Kid. Welcome to episode 55 of BIM After Dark Live. Super excited. I have an awesome guest. We're going to be talking hardware, Revit hardware. So Quadro versus Geforce, AMD or Intel versus AMD. All of the questions that you have probably never had actually answered by someone other than you Googling 1,000 places and eventually just deciding on whatever machine you have right now, we are going to answer today. So I'm super excited about that. If you're in the market for a new machine or you're just wondering over all these years what makes sense for hardware, we're going to dive into it. And so before I jump into that, I did want to thank our sponsor, which is Bim Box. And today we're actually going to do something a little unique. I don't need to tell you about BIMBOX because my guest is going to tell you about BIMBOX. But if you are interested throughout this entire episode in about BIMBOX and what they are, or you're in the market for a new machine, head on over to bimbox.bimafterdark.com or sales@bimboxusa.com. You can email them, and you will probably get in touch with this person that we're going to be talking to today, which is pretty cool. So you get to meet him today, and then you could always email him and continue geeking out on this stuff. Before we actually jump in and I introduce my guest, I did want to mention to you guys to make sure that if you're new here, to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, hit the notification bell, and while it's dinging, I didn't want to. Is it done dinging? It's done dinging. And I also wanted to mention that today is going to be the very last live stream for a little while. For those of you who've been following along live or the replays, you know that I'm going to be having a life event soon. I will be introducing my second child to this world, and so I'm trying to take a little bit of a break from the live streams, probably for a couple months. But I will be producing canned content, so keep an eye on the YouTube channel. And also, if you're interested in looking at the previous 55 episodes, just head on over to live.bimafterdark.com. And always, as always, you can email me, tweet at me, check out the blog at the Revit Kid or bimafterdark.com and see what's going on. But thank you guys for these 55 episodes, and I can't wait for the next live one. But for now, we're going to take a little bit of a break. So with all that being said, and also remember this is live, so ask questions. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and I know that you guys are going to be having a ton of questions as we go along. So before we jump into the actual content, I did want to introduce my guest, Buck Davis. Buck, what is up, man?
Be on this show.
Yeah, thanks for joining. This is a long time coming. I know. So you coming on the show was not your idea; it was my idea.
It
However,
was. It was.
BIMBOX sponsoring the show was your idea, and I will give you credit that it was probably 5 or 6 months worth of us chatting before I decided that BIMBOX would be the sponsor of the show. So kudos to your perseverance, as well as your you pretty much like after like the second live stream, you were like, this is a thing, let's talk about it. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone out there appreciates you supporting the show. So Buck Davis, maybe give everyone here on YouTube and watching this in the future a little background on who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
So I am Buck Davis. I'm the director of product at BIMBOX, kind of what Jeff said. I have kind of grew up in construction. I did civil project management, developed residential neighborhoods, early 2000s. Transitioned into high-end custom. That's kind of where I got into Revit modeling. Went to work for a Autodesk consulting firm, got into construction technology, went to work for a top 10 global GC, kind of Jeff, kind of like what you do, doing pursuit work, doing VDC coordination work. Ran into the struggle that none of the hardware we were being given quite cut it. I didn't set out to have this hardware company, right? My teams, I was running a bunch of VDC managers, a bunch of BIM managers, a bunch of laser scanning teams, and real-time rendering came out, right? We had the first time they sent me an HTC Vive, an Oculus Rift, and like we put it on, plugged it into this $7,000 Dell, this 75 something tower, and it said does not meet the minimum requirements. And I was crushed, man. It was a Saturday. I drove into work on a Saturday, like to try to start running this infuser, and like all of a sudden my heart was just crushed. So like I tried to figure out what was wrong, like what was going on, and then dug into some of the hardware because I was having a terrible experience with Navisworks, with Revit. All our teams were having long load times. Everybody's getting to the office like 20 minutes early to open up these Navisworks models and some of these Disney projects. And the more I looked into it and talked to people, my counterparts, subcontractors, concrete contractors, everyone was struggling with the same thing, right? So a couple of friends, we started hacking away, building systems over the weekend for our own companies. That turned into building it for friends in the industry, and then ended up leaving the industry and starting this company. Parents helped me out, get a loan, then took on a bunch of debt. And flash forward to about 6, 7 years ago, we've taken on some investors. We've grown. We partnered with a really, really big IT company. And now we service 50 states, enterprise companies, and have fantastic support and warranty and build the fastest systems for applications and for workflows. So that's me, and that's kind of our company, and that's the gist of us. I try not to be long-winded.
No, that's
So
perfect, man.
yeah, man, I try to be brief.
No, I think it's good for people to get a sense of where you're coming from, which is great. I mean, I know my personal struggle in the past has always been, dealing with manufacturers who don't understand what we are doing with the computers, and regardless of the actual hardware involved, just not, them, the only way to get a machine that worked for us was going to gaming manufacturers, etc. And we're not necessarily their market sector. They're not gearing towards the AC industry, per se. So there's always that little bit. So it's great to know that, and let people know that you have the background in this, and you come from the side of a user, especially, and you're feeling the pain of most people that are out here today. I also wanted to note, it's kind of funny. People are like saying hi to each other in the chat, which is really funny. I love the Revit BIM community, because it's
Community, right?
yeah, it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it is it's so funny.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like people are like, hey, how's it going? You still working here? Like they're chatting with each other on the
It's a
chat, which
small
is
community, right?
it
I
is
mean, once
it
you
is
know someone at a firm and you move somewhere else, next thing you know everybody. And
it
that's
is.
kind of why when you go to AU, it's kind of like a congregation of everyone. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? That's so beautiful.
Yeah, within the 10,000 people of the Autodesk thing, there's like this little chunk of BIM Revit people that you can hide in your own little corner, which is great.
Right, right.
So what I wanted to do today is, obviously, the answer that you would have if I said what should we do, or if what should be my next Revit machine, would be BIMBOX. And well, obviously we're on Team BIMBOX, but what I wanted to do for the sake of sort of this episode and everyone out there, is extract your knowledge of hardware sort of generally and what you've learned. So people, whether it is a BIM box, ideally, right, if they're calling you for a BIM box, then you can talk them through all of the geek out parts of it and understand why. But
Right.
even if they're not, what hardware, software interactions, and what to look out for, because that was one of the hardest things for me when people email me or message me or or tweet at me. What I'm buying a laptop. I'm a student and I'm buying a laptop this semester, and I want it to be able to do this, and this. Which one should I get? And that's a hard question to answer, but I think what I'm hoping is that we can extract some of your knowledge to give people sort of a priority list of what, why, and how for hardware and specing a machine. And again, everyone live, if you have questions as we're going along, feel free. So I guess, to sort of start us off and kick us off, when it comes to, let's start, maybe we'll break it down, and we can take this in whatever direction you want as well as we're going through. But maybe we'll start on the processor end and say, we'll start with sort of the major components. And if someone was looking to create a machine or buy a machine, or get a little more knowledge about what it is that they're selecting, let's maybe start with the processor and say, where to begin. If I'm looking for a machine and I've got a blank list or a list of all these processors that exist in the world, when and what specs, or where and what specs should we look for?
Well, and just to preface that, man, when we have people that call us up and they're like, "Hey, man, I don't need 20 computers for my company." And I just want to build one. I'm a custom builder. I'm going to build it in my garage. I have a
Right.
private practice. I'm a consultant, right? That's not. I'm cool with that, right? We'll share specs with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our client. Our client's the guy who loves computers, who works at a big firm. His IT department wants 50. They want imaging services. They want coast to coast support.
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at a good Revit system, I think processor wise, a good Revit system, I think you're looking at a fast processor. The first thing you're going to look for is a fast processor. That is the single best performance indicator of a Revit system.
Mm-hmm.
How fast that processor can go.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one thing. The second thing I would look for is going to be your motherboard, right? First thing when we talk about these Revit systems, Revit doesn't use a lot of components, right? It doesn't use multi GPU.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't require a ton of RAM. You can't really scale this out over. You just can't throw more components at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to want to get a really good motherboard because we're probably going to want to overclock our processor a little bit, right? You have to get a better motherboard to be able to handle some of those overclocks.
Mm-hmm.
You then want to go to look at a cooler. You're going to want to get cooler because you're probably going to want to push your processor a little bit faster. The number one thing I think a lot of manufacturers and a lot of people overlook is when you look at processors, you always see this 5.2 or 5.3 or 5.1. You always see these sexy big numbers. And then when people get these systems, they always call me and they're like, I bought one and I'm not seeing anywhere near that speed. On Intel, if your processor is running over 70 degrees Celsius, you don't see boost speed. And then there are all these other caveats. If you're pulling too much power, if too many cores are running at once. So you kind of run into these, they kind of throw this awesome potential speed out there. And then they have all these asterisks that you never see in the fine print, right? So I think processor one, get a really good motherboard.
So the processor. So if I'm on any website where I'm specking out a laptop or a desktop, and I have a radio button and I can choose 3 different processors, and one's an i7 and it says 2.6 to 2.9 or something like that, and the other one is an i7, it says 3.4 to 3.6, and then maybe the other one's an i9, 3 point something to whatever, right? Like you mentioned here, how do I know if I'm spending $400 more or $600 more for this i9? Is it going to be faster than the i7 for me as far as this Revit box is concerned, right? What tells me what is going to give me the best bang for my buck?
Great question. So typically you'll see a lot of these times an i7 and an i9 are pretty much the same processor. A lot of times the i9 is a much better batch version of it. What I mean is the silicone's better. They took a silicone closer to the center of that. And I can get into the silicone manufacturing process of how this happens.
We can talk about it a little bit, but
no,
I guess
I know.
But I think understanding, what you're saying here. I mean, these are most likely architects and engineers out there, so we're all going to geek out on this stuff. So no problem.
So great example on this, right? The 9900K in the 9th gen was a 8-core 16-thread processor with specific caches. When the 10th gen came out, they came out with the 10700K, which was a i7. The 9900K was an i9. The 10700K had the identical specs, same caches, same everything as the 9900K that was an i9 9th gen. They're the same processor, same clock, same boost, same everything. So does the i7 or the i9 better, right?
So what's the only difference is the die cut, or what you were talking about, the silicone itself, or
the batching. If you're gonna try to be overclocking them more, the i9, you definitely want the i9. Having said that, the i7s run really fast. I'm saying right now, I don't think if I was shopping for a computer and I was on a budget, you can get a great i7, you can get a great i9. If you're not planning on overclocking them that far, I wouldn't say you'd have to worry about too much of that. So if you're just, you know what I mean? It depends on how far you're trying to do this. If you're trying to take this and overclock it to the nth degree, get splurged for the i9. You're going to be doing some other stuff on the spending anyway. You're going to get a better cooler. You're going to do some stuff on RAM, right? So it kind of depends on what you're doing budget-wise. If you're planning on going out and spending more money, go with the i9. You'll have a better chance for overclocking. If you don't plan on that, you're fine with an i7.
So good transition here into sort of cooling and sort of the importance of it, as well as sort of how to because that's one of the things that you can't necessarily spec. Let's say you're buying a laptop, for example. You can't spec the cooler, really, right? I mean, there's so you're either going by the manufacturer and what they say as far as are they using thermal whatever, are they how's the fan set up, or all this stuff, or it's you get the thing and then you see how hot it's running. So is there any way? And again, I'm thinking laptop now. I know desktop is a little more flexible, right? You have more control over the cooling itself. Is there any way? Is there any indicator to figure out sort of, is this a good or a cool running machine? Is it just when you get it and you run it, that's the only way you're going to tell, or you try and find manufacturers that maybe even publish their temperatures, benchmark temperatures or something? I'm not because I've never actually been able to to do that, right? It's usually after the fact is when I find out how fast or cool this machine is, right? And that's
So if you go back to, if you don't mind sharing your
yeah,
screen,
sure.
I want to kind of show you, this is the cooling chart
Mm-hmm.
of the same processor at different clock speeds from different cooling methods. I don't know if you're sharing it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Sharon.
All right, is this up? Okay,
Yep.
so this is a 9900K. This came from Tom's Hardware. This shows a 9900K processor with an air-cooled cooler, a 240 millimeter liquid cooler, and then this is our BIMBOX. We have a 360 millimeter liquid radiator with our direct die process. So that's not going to be a traditional cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at what's relevant. On the air cooler, at an all-core 5 gigahertz, that processor is hitting 100 degrees Celsius. All right, it's about to fail.
That's
okay,
or melt out of your machine.
I mean, your computer's not doing well, and this is during a burn-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is under load. That's not just running Stidle, but that's assuming you run your computer and you're actually doing something parallel.
Mm-hmm.
At stock speeds, it's running well over 80 degrees Celsius, and we said the magic number for boost was 70.
Mm-hmm.
So at stock speeds, a stock processor with an air cooler, you're not going to see a whole lot of boost, just to throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, you don't get that inclination that, hey, someone's going to sell me, a manufacturer's going to sell me a 9900K with an air cooler, and they're going to sell it to me, and it's probably not going to get to 5.1 that often. They kept telling me 5.1, right? Even with a liquid cooler, if you look at this again, at 5 gigahertz, it's heating up quite considerably, right? You're almost at the same place.
Yep.
Stock, you're still a little bit better, but it's not incredible. We're able to run so slow, and it's not gonna harp on BIMBOX full time, but that's because of it comes from the process of delidding. We take that aluminum heatsink off. That heatsink, that's that thermal barrier. Aluminum is not that great at transmitting heat. Once you get rid of that, then you're mounting copper directly to a die. So that's the only way we're able to do that. I'm not harping on us, but yeah.
So explain that again. So if you were instead of the stock aluminum heatsink or whatever, maybe your motherboard, I guess, would that be what it is? Which part is
the heatsink on top of the processor.
Okay,
yep. Let me get to this.
Sure.
So right there, this is the 9900K processor that we're talking about. The green portion that you're looking at is the PCB. That's where the die is sitting. That's what you place into your process into your motherboard. That aluminum square is the heat sink. That is soldered to your die. So the die heats up, the heat gets transmitted through the solder, spreads out across that aluminum heat sink, and then your cooler's mounted to that, right? So the idea is that there's a thermal paste there, and then your cooler is pulling the heat up and then dissipating it out either through your case, or if you have a liquid cooler, outside of your case, right? So that's the barrier. It has to get through that aluminum barrier.
This is your first thermal bridge away from it, right? And so you could have as much as you want on top of it, but your first layer is actually
has to get through there.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
It has to get through there. And that's why when we're looking at this, even when you look at this image right here, which is where we've ripped the top off, you can see that the solder is not even applied consistently smooth, right? And this isn't just to show, what it is, but not many people have ever seen a die with the top ripped off.
Right.
It's really uneven, and it's actually pretty thick. That's a polished die, so when you actually mount your cooler directly to that, you're able to get a dramatic drop in temperature. So that's how the goal of everything is to keep your system cool.
Right.
And that's what I would tell anybody building a computer. Focus on keeping temperatures cool. It is a mechanical system. If you're an architect, you get that. It's a system, right? You have things in there. You have electricity going through it. The cooler you can keep it, the faster everything can go. Yeah. So that's just to show this stuff a little bit when we're talking about building something. That was my advice to everyone.
So any manufacturers who maybe talk about doing this process, maybe the more higher end or custom may talk about it. I don't know any sort of bigger chains that do that, but that's a sure sign that you might be getting a cooler. But that's also if you have something that maybe is running too hot, there's the possibility of you doing this, if you know, or somebody doing this for you, essentially to help cool your machine, so to speak. And I
Yeah.
want to one thing I want to mention. Maybe this may strike a chord with some people. I know we have architects and engineers out there and contractors, so you know they probably already starting to get it. But one of the things that I always think about with cooling on computers is anyone out there who are car people. If anyone knows mechanics and cars, you know I'm you know I also do car things on the side, so I'm pretty familiar with it. It's sort of the idea of the intercooler with the turbo, and you know you want air going into your motor as cool as possible, and it shows in the horsepower you get out of the car. The cooler the air coming in, the higher the horsepower. It's the same idea, right? The cooler the machine, the
Completely.
higher the horsepower you're gonna get. So that's how
Completely.
I connect it, but I don't know if that works for anyone else.
Yeah.
maybe we got some car geeks out there. We'll see.
I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean, the computer, the CPU is the engine of your car. I mean, if you keep it cool, you can keep it running fast.
Hmm.
If you don't, it slows down. Intel processors and
Yeah.
AMD processors, the hotter they get, they slow down because they have a warranty, right? They
Hmm.
protect themselves,
Hmm.
and that's just dialed in on them. So
So let me ask you a question then. If I have if I have a laptop right now, maybe it's a year or two old, and from whoever, and you know the fans cranking all the time. You look at the temp. Hopefully, you have a way to look at your temps. If not, everyone should install some sort of program where you can see your temps, because that's just something you should do. Honestly, I've been doing that for a while myself, especially back in the old days when we used to render natively in Revit. Because you want to talk about core temperatures going up, oh my gosh, and GPU. But let's say we have that, and we notice. I mean, maybe we notice our computer chugging after a year or two because of this. And maybe it's a laptop, not a desktop. Would it something like a cooling pad help, or at that point are we kind of beyond help, so to
Well,
speak?
well, to go back to your first question you asked a second ago, can you control,
Mm-hmm.
the cooling on your laptop?
Mm-hmm.
I would say people get the cooling that they're looking for, because if you go out and get a quarter-inch thick computer with a 30 series and an i9,
Mm-hmm.
they're not smaller fans that do the same thing as larger fans. There's not a new technology that cools processors and
That's
GPUs out.
that's
Everyone would
it.
be using it, right?
Yeah, right, right.
So I think you kind of need to balance the performance you're expecting. I think the quarter-inch laptops for presentations, people that go into offices,
Hmm.
give presentations, makes complete sense.
Hmm.
People that are trying to do production work on a desk,
Hmm.
that's a different story, right? So you
Hmm.
kind of want to gauge what kind of production you're going to be doing, how much stress you're going to be putting on the system,
Hmm.
and what makes sense to you, right? That the
Yep.
more mobile you are, the less slim you're going to be,
Hmm.
and the less cooling you're probably going to have in your system. So
Right. So you're
just
either
a
gonna
food
have
for
a
thought.
fatter laptop, or it's gonna be regular, thin enough, but it won't be it won't be a MacBook Air first.
And there's a
And-
middle ground, right?
yeah.
I mean,
Right. Right.
you've
You know
seen
you're
our slim, which is
sacrificing.
an
Yeah.
inch, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
not terrible, but the
It's
fans do kick up if you're rendering, right?
right,
I mean,
and
they
that
do
was my
kick up
next
with
thing I
twin
was going to
motion.
say. Is the other thing is you may be dealing with louder fans, but that's because of what we're talking about right now, which is those fans are doing something very important in there. like you want those things to be screaming, because otherwise your computer will be slower. And so I mean, I
Completely.
can't think of the last in 6 7 years now having a laptop that was quiet while I was working, right? I mean, that's the whole, it's doing the work. So I think just in general, that's something, regardless of who you're buying it from, the
Completely.
loud fan speed for using Revit, Twinmotion, Lumion, etc. You're going to expect that because it's cooling it down. I just
Completely.
wanted, there's a couple of things on chat I wanted to, so Key just asked about gaming cards versus Quadros. We'll get into that. So hang around, Key. We'll talk about Quadro versus GeForce and all
Yeah,
that
we
stuff.
will.
Um, who was it, Matt or Brendan actually asked? So perfect segue, since we're talking about processing, we're talking about cooler. Um, um, Intel versus AMD. So Brendan asked a similar question, so I figure we'll just talk about that. So if I'm specing a machine right now, desktop or laptop, but we'll say desktop for now. Um, you know, do I start Intel? Do I start AMD? Does it matter anymore? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, and what have you learned in with your vast knowledge of the two and how they compare these days?
Are we talking about a Revit system? I mean, is
We're
that
talking
so?
about a Revit system. Let's stay in the right now. Let's talk about just a Revit system. So if I'm buying a desktop, or maybe I'm custom building one, and I'm looking at a motherboard and a processor and motherboard combination, and I'm like, I want to go AMD Ryzen, or I want to go Intel i7 i9. Like, what? How is there? Because I believe, and I haven't spec'd a custom machine in a while, but I believe AMD is still cheaper than Intel, right? Is that still the case? No,
No.
now they're getting closer. So
Um,
maybe it's not a
they're
big.
more expensive right now
Okay.
for comparable. Yeah, so that's been kind of one of the things. As a product manager, I know that there's this kind of battle back and forth. Like, well, Intel, I love
Mm-hmm.
Intel. AMD, look what they're doing. My job is not to get in between that. It's to try both hardware. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple AMD processors right here, 5950s, and I have a couple 11900Ks right here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you know, we modify all the processors we use. So I'm gonna hold the issue out right now. I
Mm-hmm.
think AMD has made some leaps and bounds forward.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about a budget system right now, Intel would actually be the budget system. You're
Is
talking
that
about
because of just availability, or is that just now that's the pricing that's set up? Because when I was specing
well,
custom machines, AMD was always the cheaper option.
so retail, this is about 795 on Amazon. This is about 12 something right
Mm-hmm.
now. Retail, this is I think 520,
Hmm.
and right now you can't get either one of these. Just FYI. So,
Yeah, yeah. You can,
so
yeah,
it's good.
getting
It's good to be a
any
production
parts right
manager.
now, right, right.
No. So,
uh,
I would say the jury's out right now on the
okay.
next gen stuff for
Have
me.
you have you have you benchmarked them with a Revit system at all, just to see if they compare as far as performance wise with Revit specifically, or not specifically?
I have not. I've not. So the last 2 weeks, I was working with delidded 11900Ks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ours are running 5.4. We have one that's running 5.4 gigahertz all core. We have one that's running 5.3 gigahertz all core.
Mm-hmm.
There is a 20% increase in instructions per clock. That's IPC, which everybody all of a sudden is talking about in
That's
the
it.
past
That's
six
the
months.
buzzword.
AMD
Yeah,
started talking about it. Now everybody talks about it.
yeah.
But this next week, I have two systems that have 5950s in them. And I'm going to be doing some tuning and overclocking on those
Mm-hmm.
to see what they get. The Intels right now are running the RFO bench
Mm-hmm.
like 76, 78 right now,
Yep.
which is really, really solid.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some 5950s run them in 78, 79. So I think there's not really a wrong answer right now. And I'd
Yeah.
say that. I would say that Intel running the 5.4 gigahertz, it's one of the most responsive systems I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And having the all core at 5.4 with the 20% IPC.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see if AMD holds up to that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've seen people online say they got it all core to 5 gigahertz.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to put them side by side and see which one really outperforms. So I'll have to post some videos here in the next couple of weeks about that. But
Yeah, no, it'd be
right
interesting
now,
to
I
see for
don't
sure.
think you can get a bad system either way.
Yeah, awesome.
No.
So there were a couple questions, and I'll post links to these in the description as well as on the blog post tomorrow. But one question was about any software applications that you like to use for monitoring CPU and GPU temperatures.
Yes, HW Info. If you get
HW
that one,
Info, awesome.
yeah, Hardware
H
Info 64. HW
awesome.
Info 64. If you go Google it, you can download it.
Mm-hmm. And I'll
Just go to
post a link to it too.
sensors.
But yeah, yep.
When you open it up, just click sensors only, and it'll drop down and give you about every bit of information about your computer. It's really, really cool. You can store the log file, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's this application called Generic Log Viewer.
Mm-hmm.
You can open the log file, and it'll make really, really pretty graphs and charts to show you what happened over time. You can pretty much compare any piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really solid program if you're trying to figure out how the application is hitting hardware.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so another question I think somebody had in there was, what is the, well, I'm trying to think how to word this. So first it was, what's the reason for why can't we get it? What's the shortage? And then my question are the prices being reflected by supply as well? Or is it just
So
availability?
no, there's a global shortage.
Yeah.
I mean, the Intel 11th gens, I got a tray full about 2 weeks ago, and then the same day they handed me a tray full, they were like, "This is it for the next 5 months." And I said, "What do you mean? Like, you're just not going to give them to us?" And they were like, "We're not shipping any to the U.S. for another 5 months."
Wow.
So AMD, they're kind of like, I was like, "Can y'all fill the order?" Which they've been chomping at the bit to give me to buy AMD processors.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, how many do you need? And I kind of threw out a number, and they're like, could you make it work with less?
Yeah.
And Jeff, the tough thing is being a manufacturer. If we can't get a commitment of allocation to fill large orders from clients,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really a product line for us.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't fill a 100 unit order,
Yeah.
we can't really go to market with that. So it's tough
Yeah,
right now.
and I will, from experience, I've been hearing from our general IT folks, even with the larger manufacturers, they're struggling with specific systems and configurations and whatnot, and so I'm sure everyone out there is also dealing with some shortages and having to figure out. So
Well,
speaking of shortages, let's talk graphics cards
yes.
and supply and demand. Because as everyone out there knows, graphics cards, forget about processors. Graphics cards are a whole different ball game for many reasons. But we'll start with sort of
Guys, yeah.
Is that a 3000? What was that? I missed it.
That is a 30, 60, 12 gig.
Oh
I'm
man,
about to drop in one of these systems.
you
We just switched to it in our base system. So
don't show that. People are gonna find out where you live, man.
yeah, someone's gonna come bombard my house. Yeah.
Just for a graphics card. But it's true. I mean, right? They're in high demand for different reasons, not just the supply chain, but I think cryptocurrency and all of that is causing some major issues with the RTXs. And
Well,
but I think go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say one of the things that we've heard is that a lot of it is the transistors that they need to actually make the processors. It's not just
okay.
That's the big crippling blow.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of those materials, but that's car manufacturers are shutting down their facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Graphics card shortages. When you think about it, now we're about to talk about graphics cards. The 30 series, it's a 2-year product line. Neil Cross actually pointed this out on Twitter the other day.
Mm-hmm.
A product line typically lasts 2 years, and the 30 series has been out of stock for 6 months, almost 25% of its lifestyle.
Oh,
you know what I mean? That's crazy.
That's
crazy.
nuts. That's nuts. And anyone, yeah. I mean, anyone who's tried to buy them knows that that it's very difficult to get. So before we jump into that, then I guess let's do. So we talked about processors, we talked about cooling, we talked about that. So now we'll do graphics card, and then hopefully we'll have time. We can also talk RAM, and I think those are kind of the 4 big pieces. I mean, we could touch on hard drive and stuff like that, but I think those are probably the biggest questions you probably get too, are those main components. So let's jump into the Quadro versus Geforce and talk a little bit about. Let's talk specifically Revit, and then we can build it into Twinmotion, Lumion, and the real time stuff, and how these all perform. Because I mean, to me, that's the challenge, right? Is that in theory, Revit will run, but we're not just using Revit anymore. So I think we kind of talk about it on both ends. But I'll let you do your spiel as far as as your opinions between these two. Actually, I'll pull up the picture so everyone sees, because you pulled up the perfect slide for this, which is Quadro versus RTX or Quadro versus Geforce. I know that's a major question that IT people across the country as well as architects have, right?
I mean, honestly, I don't know why Quadros were ever spec'd for these computers. I mean, I
can tell you why. Because you go to Autodesk's website, and it was the only certified graphics card for Revit for like 15 years. That's why. Certified.
So that comes from, I mean, I don't know if that's a backdoor deal with Autodesk, or if that's because when you use Quadro graphics cards, NVIDIA gives you special access to their developers, and they'll update drivers. Having said that, because there's so many Geforce cards in circulation, when there are bugs, their hot fixes issued immediately. I mean, there are updates to these drivers constantly, and they're better. But one thing that I saw when I first started this industry, we've never used Quadro cards. We've used them with clients that was mandatory for their company. We're happy to do that for a company-wide purchase, but we've never recommended it. Look at these two cards right here. This is a RTX 5000, and this is a 2080 Super. You honestly have trouble going to the NVIDIA website, and I actually have 2 of these pulled up for the A6000 and the 3090. In a second, I'll show it. But when you actually look at the side-by-side specs, the base clock, the boost clock, and the memory clock on the Geforce card are higher, right? The rendering, all those specs are identical, like every single one of them. The theoretical performance is identical, which is a little deceptive because how are the clock speeds going to be higher? All the components be the same, but they have to get the exact same output. So, when you look at it, one cost, even if they were the same price, let's just throw this out here. Even if they were the exact same price, one has two fans, better cooling. We already said it. The way you keep things running fast is you cool them, right? So one has higher clock speeds, one has higher memory speeds, one has the exact same number of performance cores, everything. And the other one doesn't. It's slower. It has one fan. I mean, looking at these objectively, if Autodesk didn't say the Quadro cards are the best card, if NVIDIA didn't say these were the holy grail, it would be an easy question. Which one would you buy? I'd buy the 2080 Super all day. When we started recommending these cards and putting them in our systems in 2015, it was a struggle, man. I mean, we were going to Built and people who were asking us, like, how do you deal with Autodesk support? I mean, you know what I mean? Because you couldn't create a support ticket with Autodesk if you had a Geforce card.
Right.
So every time we sold the company 10 systems, we would throw in the cheapest Quadro card possible so their IT manager could take the Geforce card out, drop the Quadro card in, handle the support. You know what I mean? It was insane. So in 2019, and this was all real quiet, they released the studio drivers, which opened up 30-bit color, which was a huge, I mean, for creative people and visualization people, that was monumental.
Right.
That opened from 16 million shades of color to over a couple billion, which is how you get photorealistic. and it opened up quite a few professional, quote unquote, professional features and provided Autodesk support. I'm still not convinced, and I haven't seen a driver release that said it did anything to benefit Revit, and I still haven't seen a Quadro line that says there's any functionality benefit to Revit. But if you look at the Revit performance, Revit uses a graphics card to maintain the image on the screen, right? So the highest refresh rate would be the best card. And that's why we've always done that. I also, when I started this company, I was getting into real-time rendering. I saw the writing on the wall that real-time was going to be a part of the everyday built world and built community life cycle. So we've always picked the best card for our people, and it's always been the Geforce card. Up to this past year, up to this year, it's been tough though, because if you got to a certain point, like you had to go with a Titan card, which was the only card that had 24 gigabytes. And not many people knew about the Titan. I think, there's a couple things that have gone on, and if you're not familiar with it, the Quadro line has been retired. The Titan line was retired, and the Tesla line was retired. Okay, all that kind of happened real quick.
Okay.
The interesting thing about that is now the 3090 is what the Titan used to be. So no one ever called us asking for Titan. That never happened.
Right.
But we get calls every day. You got a 3090. You got a 3090, because now it's the top of the Geforce cards, right? So that was a beautiful play by NVIDIA to get that card relevant again. When they added 24 gigabytes of RAM and Geforce cards, you can still double up and use the NVLink to get the 48 gigabytes of RAM. So now in the Geforce platform with the studio drivers, which supported by Autodesk, and you have the R440 drivers, which are for virtualization, you can have two RTX 3090s with 48 gigabytes of shared memory, with virtualization, with 30-bit color. I don't really see that there's a place in our environment for these A6000s unless you get one for free, or unless you need double float 64-bit performance, which I'm happy to put one in your system if that's what you want. But as far as me recommending it, I don't really see that being the best thing for most of our clients, right? So they're physical replicas, and the performance is the same. I'm sorry that's long-winded. For 6 years I've had to explain this to people, and now it's gotten easier because everybody calls asking for Geforce.
Yep.
But man, people used to look at me at build events like I was crazy.
Well,
I'd be holding up
you
1080
can,
cards
yeah,
and
now this is
yeah.
recorded, so you can bookmark this section. Just send them a link to this video and just say watch these 5 minutes of me explaining the difference between these two.
Well,
Somebody did ask about the A6000 versus RTX 6000 and that sort of, or RTX versus A and those series. Is there what's the play there?
so the A6000 is well, the idea here was okay, so that there is no more Quadro. The
Hmm.
A6000, which would have been the P6000 or the RTX 6000, is now the A6000.
Hmm.
The what would be a Tesla 40, a P40, whatever it was, RTX 40, is now the A40. The A40 and the A6000 are the same card. The A40 does not have cooling. It's made for data centers that have active cooling.
Hmm.
The A6000 has cooling. Okay, so my belief, and this is just me seeing writing on the wall, was that NVIDIA saw that their big market for these professional cards was machine learning, AI, and all those data center markets. So they wanted to provide a consistent naming convention for those clients. Up to this point, they had to tell these data center clients, well, you need to buy the high end Quadros and the low end Teslas, right? I mean, that would have been confusing if you were a data center. So I need to buy the RTX 8000 and 6000 and the Tesla 40.
Hmm.
But now they say buy the A6000 or the A40 or the A100.
Got it. So
So
now it's one product line. It makes it easier, or
they
naming line. Yeah.
specified, they made the naming
Hmm.
conventions easy for their customers, right? And that's a soft play saying that you didn't really need quite, I mean, it's all good. I'm not going to call anybody out.
But I think that that's, it gets to the heart of it, which is if I'm buying a new Revit machine right now, from anyone, you know, uh, and in your experience, right, the graphics card is really only doing one main function in Revit. It's an important function, right? It's the snappiness you're feeling, it's the refresh rate of the screen, but the reality is when you think about all the other stuff you're doing, that's where you might want to choose the graphics card. And I would imagine that everyone out there today watching this or watching this in the future is probably using Enscape, Twinmotion, Lumion, Unreal, you name it. I guarantee you they're using one of those, 5 or 6 real-time renderings out there. So if that's the case, then you can't go wrong with buying a card that runs those really well because Revit will run really well on the same type of card. Is that kind of the way they should be thinking about this instead of saying, well, we've always bought Quadros and they said they're workstations for professionals. Maybe we should do that, right? That's kind
Well,
of.
so, and that's been tough because like we wouldn't have a company if there were other aftermarket manufacturers that were doing a good job at what they were doing. No, I mean, I'm being
Yeah,
honest with you,
yeah.
right? When I was in a position, I could have bought any system I wanted. Valve Brady would have paid for whatever I wanted, and
Mm-hmm.
I looked for it. I couldn't find the
Right.
systems I wanted
Mm-hmm.
because most manufacturers were trying to have AEC be a subset of their business.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were trying to figure out what to build, they went to the Autodesk requirement page. They bought the Quadros, they bought the Xeons,
Mm-hmm.
they put the ECC RAM in, which was going to make a great Revit system,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they sold you. It's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit better than Adele, but it wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I think graphics cards right now are either horrendously overspec or horrendously underspec.
Mm-hmm.
Either someone tells you you can get away with a cheap Quadro because you just do Revit and CAD,
Mm-hmm.
or they say, or someone has a bad experience with the computer and they're like, I need a 3080,
You're right.
right?
Right. Yep.
So like the way we do it and the way I decide, what our base model graphics card right now, like I said, it's a 30, 60, 12 gigabyte card. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My assumption on that is most people aren't just doing Revit. They have two monitors. They might have Revit up. They might have Inkscape up. They might have multiple models of Revit up. They might have Bluebeam up, CAD up. I don't know. They might be doing lots of different 2D, 3D applications, maybe some real-time rendering,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they decide to pick up Inkscape in a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is get something that's going to future-proof you because you might want to do something different in 2 years. You might want to add another monitor.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know, right? But cover your bases and make sure you're going to have a good experience over the next 3 years. I tell you, we have general contractors that have a 3060 running big projects, airport renovation projects, and Inkscape, and they don't complain at all. They have
Right.
the mechanical, structural, everything in there, and it's smooth. It takes half a second to stop and render, and that's a 3060. So I wouldn't. Everybody calls, well, I'm like, you came from a bad computer, right? They're like, yes. Please, I don't want to have a bad experience. It's like,
Yeah.
look, trust us on this one. Just go with a 3060. You have your 30-day money back guarantee. And they're like, I'm gonna take you up on that. If not, I'm like,
Yeah.
we'll send you a 3070. It's fine.
Yep.
Just, come on, trust us for a minute.
You made
So
you made a great point there
understanding
though
that,
about the monitors that I don't think people think about right away when it comes to graphics card is also, we're in a world now where very few people are working with one monitor at all. Like most people have a minimum of two, right? And then it just goes crazy from there.
right?
And if we're running all of these programs on top of multiple monitors, that has a dramatic impact on the GPU. Um, uh, is that something you should keep in mind as well? Is maybe you want a baseline because you're a project manager who doesn't necessarily use the real-time rendering, but you want something snappy. But maybe you have four monitors, four 4K monitors, right? Then
Right.
you still might want a little bit of power under the hood for graphics. Is that
Completely.
yeah?
Completely. And when we look at these systems, and I know we talk about cost with people sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
I think about the things that you use the most, right? You don't cheap out on your mattress. You sleep on that. 6 hours for me, maybe 5.5, but most people sleep on their mattress 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then you sit at your desk. My chair is nice. I want to sit at a comfortable chair for the 10 hours I work. And then my computer, right? You interact with your computer all day. Project managers, people that sit there doing emails all day. You don't want to get a cheap monitor with the blue lights. But the one thing I will say about that is people go, what's the difference between a 3070 and a 3080? And all of a sudden you're like, well, frames per second. What's your refresh rate on your monitor? And they're like, it's 120 hertz. And I'm like, the 3080 will get you like 300 frames per second. And they're like, oh, what does that mean? And I'm like, your monitor will never even be able to see the frames per second that the GPU can put out, right? So at some point, unless you're using that GPU to render in Lumion or you're using Twin Motion with crazy assets, you really won't see the difference between the two cards. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, but don't underspec your monitor, but you also don't need to go balls to the wall with a 3090.
Right.
Not everybody does. That's kind of what we're here for.
That's a great point, and I think that helps. I think Deval in the chat had a similar question about the hertz of the monitor versus display and all that. So that was a great explanation. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
John had a question specifically for BIMBOX, but I think in general, I'm just curious your thoughts and opinions on this, because this to me is a little bit of a thing of the past. Is the docking station for a laptop. And sort of, I don't know, and I think that's the convenience of clipping in and clipping out, but even I've noticed even some of the baseline engineer laptops we have, which may be like a Dell Precision 5000 series, it's 16 gig, it's doing nothing but Excel and Outlook all day, right? Even those, right. I think they're starting to phase out the actual click-in docking station. So what are your thoughts on that sort of thing? Is that a thing of the past, or what?
We don't do it.
Yeah.
We don't do it. Okay.
Right.
So just about, we don't do that.
Is there a reason that you think that's kind of gone out of the way? Is it the peripherals, the fact that you need a separate connector, like that whole thing? Or, I mean, what?
I don't know why Dell and them do. I remember having one of those. I remember it was kind of cool because like you felt like you were like, you know what I mean? You were putting your easel on and you were setting it down, and it was like really nice to hear that click. I don't know. Maybe one day we have the power charging, the pad where you can set your laptop and your phone and everything gets charged. I think with us, the technology is changing so quick with that Type-C connection. We have some people that need balls to the wall. They want Ethernet. They want, 2 monitors. And then we have some people that are just like, look, I want my mouse, my keyboard, a power connector, and then a monitor. So we kind of try to recommend the ones that we think are best for them. We also have some people that bring their own docks and don't want to buy a new dock. So as far as the old school, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be a trend. I don't know if I see a lot of manufacturers keeping that up, though. Because now you're going to these super slims, and how slim can the dock be and still be a thing?
And I think John just was asking too. I think he wasn't necessarily talking about the old school click ones. He was talking more about like a Thunderbolt or like a dock, which I think those are pretty universal now, right? As long as you have the the inputs on any laptop, you can use some of those universal docking stations, right? I mean, and
Uh,
that's what I've
that
done for almost 6 years now. Is and I'm pretty mobile, and I just have, as long as you buy 2 power supplies, you're golden, right? Keep one in your bag, keep one plugged in at your desk, and then I have one, two, well, here I have a lot because of the live stream, but usually
right.
it's 2 USBs, an HDMI, and then a power or an Ethernet or whatever. And it's just, so you come in, you plug those 4 things in the morning, and you're plugged in, and that's kind of what I do. But I have some people use Thunderbolt docks, so at least they're just plugging in one cable, and I don't think it makes a big difference. I don't know. Is that kind of the approach that you guys have taken? Is let folks
So
decide
it
what they
kind of
want?
depends. We work with people on that. If you're
Mhm,
trying to get on these designated graphics card laptops,
mhm,
the back ports where the graphics card plugs in, those are the ones you're getting direct access to the graphics card.
yes.
On
Mhm,
our systems, there's a HDMI like Type C over
mhm,
Type C connection.
mhm,
So if you do hook up a dock into that, you can hook up
mhm,
a display to that dock, and it
mhm,
will come from the GPU.
mhm.
So you kind of have to check on that.
Right.
Not
Yep.
all
Good
Dell
point.
and HP docks play well with other manufacturers' laptops.
Mhm,
That's the only caveat. I've
mhm.
seen that happen. Not always with us, but I've heard it happen before. So just to throw that out there.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah, I would say that when it comes to docking and whatnot, or even having multiple monitors, yeah, understanding what HDMI's are working and how your laptop's working, and how it's projecting the displays to each HDMI or video out or display out, whatever the hell it's called now,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
important. It's definitely important to
You
know
can
that.
become a professor of HDMI and USB. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and it
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
pretty confusing too when you realize that, oh wait, my integrated, especially on laptops, my integrated graphics is actually pushing this monitor, but my graphics card is pushing this monitor. And you're like, what is
Completely.
happening?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. There was a couple of questions I saw in here that I think were helpful moving forward. Man, we just had like a whole bunch of. So somebody going back to processors, because I'm actually curious too on your thoughts, and how when we're again, the whole idea is giving people information when they're buying computers, right?
Yeah,
When it
yeah.
comes to number of cores and how it's advertised with processors, how do you approach this? If you're given a list of, I don't care if it's AMD or Intel or whatever, and it's in how it's marketing the number of cores. What is it? Is it just go for the maximum cores you can possibly buy, or is there some marketing specialty that Intel's doing that doesn't matter as much as you think, sort of thing?
I would say that about 99.9% of people in the world don't use multi-core applications. And when I say no, I mean
Yeah,
that. Like
yeah.
if you're not using V-Ray, if you're not using Ferrocene, if you're
Hmm.
not using Autodesk Recap,
Hmm.
and I mean when I say multi-core, I mean like it'll scale out over 64 cores if you have 120 cores. So if you're not using that, the core count doesn't matter. Most people are using few core applications. If you're using AutoCAD, if you're using Revit, if you're
Hmm.
using Civil 3D, if you're using Bluebeam, all those different things don't use a lot of cores.
Hmm.
Okay, so the one thing you caveat to that is while we only use single core applications, we do multitask. We do
Hmm.
have a couple different things going on at the same time, right? I think one of the challenges I face and that I think we're pretty good at, our team's pretty good at, is if you look at processor performance, it is either a single core or it's either multi-core.
Hmm.
Most people's workflow falls somewhere in between all that, right? I typically think most people really anywhere from 8 to 12. I honestly, I think processor technology right now is not going in the direction that I like it going in. Right now, we're like 64 cores and 128 cores, and
Hmm.
now we can just add more die to a CPU. We can get 256 cores, and I'm like,
Right.
but it goes slower,
Hmm.
right? So I think the thing that I would like to see, if I could have my Nirvana processor, it would be a 12 to 14 core that we could clock to like 5455, that had a ton of PCIe lanes, that I could get a bunch of drives on there. I could get a bunch of CPUs on it. I get a bunch of different NIC
Hmm.
cards or GPUs or all these different connections and have direct access to the CPU. I don't think we do enough things that are multi-core, and I don't think we're busy enough on a computer. I mean, you might have 7 or 8 programs open at once,
Hmm.
and you're still not taxing out 10 cores or 16 threads. You're not hammering your computer. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just to throw that out there, you don't need 40
No,
cores.
that's great. So really, yeah.
Yeah.
So really, the speed is definitely we'll see more impact from speed, the number of cores, most likely on our DRAM.
Speed,
Yep.
speed, and then the increase instructions per clock. So
Mm-hmm.
getting those two things, I think we're going to hit a point where speed's going to kind of let plateau out,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're going to see this IPC continue to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to kind of be what the lay of the land is moving forward. DDR5 RAMs coming out in the future, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
RAM and drives are about to get really cool, and that's going to bring a lot of performance. And I don't think a lot of people are excited about that, but I am.
Well,
Just
no,
to throw that out
that's
there.
great because I was
Yeah.
literally just trying to figure out how to transition into RAM and drives because we're running out of
No.
time. But I do want to because I think I guess when you think about we went processor with a little bit of motherboard. We talked about graphics card, and I think RAM and drive. Those are kind of the big components, right? So I think as long as we touch on those, I'm hoping that we gave people enough information to be dangerous the next time they're talking to their IT group or the next time they're making their own orders. So let's start. Maybe we'll. I mean, I guess they can kind of be intertwined. You tell me how you want to talk about RAM and drives. But again, if I'm specing a machine, laptop or desktop, how is it just crank up the RAM as high as possible, or if they give me the option of what options do I have for RAM? Because a lot of times you go on there and there'll be 16 gigs, but there'll be 4 different options for 16 gigs. What is that and what does that mean?
So on RAM, there are two different numbers. So there's a speed, which everyone advertises. You'll see 2933, you'll see 3200. Not many people give you the second number, which is latency, right? On a lot of different, I was actually Googling this before I got on here because I wanted to kind of know what the baseline knowledge of people getting on today were.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look for it, people would be like, their performance RAM doesn't mean anything in Revit. And I was looking at that and I was scratching my head and I was like, what are they talking about? And then I saw in the performance RAM they were using was a 2933 CL21. I don't even know where you can buy that RAM. Like I don't know where they sell it. I've never seen it advertised. That's the worst latency I've seen, period. You can get DDR 5000 RAM. So the higher the speed, typically the higher the latency.
Mm-hmm.
So you typically find a sweet spot somewhere in the middle. There's kind of like a crossing dividing chart. The faster you go, the higher the latency gets. So we try to find somewhere in the middle. RAM is how responsive the system is. Everything that happens on your computer when you're interacting with it is happening on RAM. Mm-hmm. Your computer loads everything on RAM, and then your RAM is interacting with your CPU. Mm-hmm. So keeping your processor able to have that quick response with RAM makes a big difference. There'll be people that argue with me on that. That's fine. Our systems are the most responsive systems out there. If you're getting a good system, I would tell you, don't overspec it with RAM. We see a lot of people coming from Dells and HPs and they've had 64 gigs of RAM and they're like, I need 64 gigs. And we're like, no, you don't. The only people we deal with that really need 64 gigs of RAM are our MEP contractors doing spooling, sheeting, and detailing work on huge projects. Mm-hmm. Most people don't need 64 gigs of RAM, but they do need some really good high performance RAM. I would say if you get a DDR 3200 CL15 or DDR4 3600 CL16, that's going to be a good RAM kit for you. I wouldn't worry, and I know we worry about dual channel or quad channel, right, yep, and how that works. Don't get caught up in that. Just get a good RAM kit by a good manufacturer, and roll with it. You'll have a good experience. I test like 50 or 60 different brands with different NAD and all this different stuff. Don't get in the weeds on that. If you're about building your own system, if you want, feel free to reach out to me, but just get a good speed and good RAM.
That's a great point. And so I think, the 32 to 64 jump, right? That's one that I see all the time too. And I think where that comes into play is the spikes that happen. And that's what I've noticed is if I'm on a machine that has 32 versus 64, there's the spike in RAM usage, but then it evens out, and it's all a matter of how long you're willing to wait for that spike to cool down, right? And that's as you mentioned, we're all multitaskers, right? And I'm very impatient, so I want that spike to not even happen. But the reality is, for the most part, it's usually just a spike and then it comes down. That's the only time I've ever seen the 32 sort of max out for me. But that's great to know, is that for 90% of what we do, 32, as long as you've got the right, latency, speed up front, and a good kit, then then you might be fine, right? And that's because
and
you're going to
it's
save a boatload of money between 32 and 64, right? Depending on
yeah,
what your budget is.
completely. Expensive RAM is expensive. Like getting high performance RAM and then getting
And RAM used to
larger
be the
sizes
cheap
of
part of
it.
building custom machines. So I was like, yeah, don't worry about the RAM; it's dirt cheap, And now it's a whole
No.
nother ball game.
Yeah, it's not the cheap thing anymore.
And so then let's tailgate that into hard disk space, or hard disk anymore. I mean, what storage space? I guess we should call it now, right? And sort of what that to me, I think if I'm I like to think I know a little bit about computers, but if I'm someone who geeks out on the zero, but goes on to again a customization form or something, that's where you've got a lot of options as far as NVMe, M.1. I mean, like there are just so many solid state options now, or so maybe quickly if you can help us understand, maybe filter out all the noise and just go, this is the type of storage stick that we should be looking at right away and what to look for.
So I love Samsung. I've always loved Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
I love their NVMe drives. They've always had great performance. They've always had a great warranty. I've had great success with them. I love the 980 Pros.
Mm-hmm.
I would say when I approach drives, I get the fastest drives I can get.
Mm-hmm.
Your drive is the slowest thing in your computer. it literally, like by
Mm-hmm.
far, your GPU is going to be the fastest. Your CPU is going to be the next.
Mm-hmm.
RAM's going to be following that. Your solid state drive is a snail in your computer compared to everything else. So it's the biggest area of opportunity for you to make an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, every time you open a file, it has to happen from your solid state drive, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're waiting for files to open in the office, if you have to open stuff in the day, I mean, if you're spending 2 to 3 minutes waiting for a file to open, solid state drive and clock speed, that's the two things that you're impacting. So get a really good drive. I would say you can always go become a drive warrior and look at all these different drives in one. Oh my God. I would also tell you that when you look at these 7,200 megabytes per second,
Mm-hmm.
that's sequential drives. That's like when a car says we get 40 miles per gallon. That's downhill with the wind behind it after someone got a push start. Okay. Most things you do are not sequential, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's random. So you really want to find a good drive that has a lot of IOPS and has a really high random drive speed. All these NVMe drives that are coming out are fantastic. You really can't go wrong on those.
Okay.
I personally like Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
They're the brand that we go by.
Mm-hmm.
We've never had any problems with them. But I would tell you, we've seen some clients come to us recently, or some people, prospects, that have quotes from other manufacturers that have SATA solid state drives on them.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is offering you a computer with a SATA solid drive, I'm talking a 2.5 inch SATA drive, they're not your friend. I'll say that right now. You don't have to buy a BIMBOX, but do not buy a SATA solid state drive. This is an NVMe drive, just for you to take a look at.
Yep.
It's the size of a stick of gum. This is a 980 Pro, and this is one of the fastest drives you can get. I think you can get this on Amazon right now for $200, $150. It'll save you hours over the course of the next 3 years. It'll pay for itself in the first 2 months. You'll love it. Boot times will be record fast and all that good stuff.
No SATA solid states. Understood. That is
sorry, Jeff. No, that's a hard stop on that. No SATA.
No Raptor drives. What were those called? Remember the mechanical hard drives? The 10,000 RPMs. I forgot what those were called.
So we still put those in our Ospreys, but like that's for when we're trying to do reality capture and you need like 48 terabytes of archival storage. Yeah. It still burns me a little bit though, because at some point you get 10 gig LAN and you can connect to cloud storage for a lot less money.
I've got a stack of mechanical hard drives from all my previous computers, and it's just like, I don't know what to do with these. I don't want to get rid of them. Sometimes I actually spin them up to get a file or something. It's like it's bizarre. It's bizarre, man. Well, this was super helpful. I mean that's great. I hope everyone enjoyed it. It seems like we got a bunch of great comments. Everyone's been enjoying the information. There were a couple of BIMBOX questions in there, so I figured we'll wrap it up with some I was trying to keep this general. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
BIMBOX is your thing, and you did a great job, so I appreciate that. But there are a couple questions on BIMBOX itself, and somebody asked about the warranty, and is it site service or ship to BIMBOX? Do you offer any site service for laptops
So
or
we
desk
don't.
machines?
We don't offer on site, and I think there's two parts to that question.
Mm-hmm.
The on-site support that most people offer, it's the same company. The same guy shows up and he's got 5 shirts in the back of his truck. The reason most of those companies offer on-site is because they don't have someone that can pick up the phone and actually troubleshoot your system remotely.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they send someone on site.
Mm-hmm.
We have an advanced RMA program. So for the majority of the components in your system, we can diagnose and we can have a part to you the next day.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a critical error in your system, no, it has to come back to us. We can get that overnighted to us and we can get that repaired pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the warranty and support, we have a full 3-year warranty, cover the system and every component in there. We're partnered with Ingram Micro, they're a $48 billion hardware giant. They have 5 different integration facilities across the country. They work with us on the production. They help us with our production, supply chain, and all that. One of the things that's different about us on the support side, excuse me, the sun started coming in.
The sun. I forgot you're on the West Coast. I'm over
No,
here.
it's
8:30. It's dark. I'm ready for bed, and the sun's
So
coming.
we provide support for our hardware, Windows stuff, traditional stuff, but we also provide support for Autodesk products, as well as a couple other products, reality capture, not for this crowd. So if you have Autodesk problems, you can contact BIMBOX support and we'll take care of you. We have techs and we'll take care of you. This is a big value to our clients because we've had a lot of people that, hey, they downloaded a new driver or they downloaded a Windows update. And all of a sudden, Revit's kind of buggy or they're getting graphics display issues and they can contact us. And it's valuable that you have one number and we get you going again. So that's included with our warranty. So that's our enterprise warranty on that.
Awesome. Great. I'm just checking to see if we have any questions. Let's see. Nothing too much. So then I guess before we wrap up, thank you, by the way, for doing this. I hope this was beneficial to everybody out there. And I hope, in general, I hope they got a chance to learn a few things about computers. And they'll be much more knowledgeable when they go to order their next machine, hopefully from BIMBOX. Any last things? Since you're here, I'll let you sort of wrap up with anything new, anything you'd want to talk about that the people should know about BIMBOX before we wrap up the show. Other than obviously reaching out to you and letting them know that you saw you here. I was gonna say you saw me here or you heard about them here, but you're here now. So they saw you here and they can call you.
Well, I don't think we told everybody, man. You didn't even kick it off. So any Revit Kid followers, you contact BIMBOX or our reseller, you get $250 off our system. On the desktop side, our price just dropped. So you contact us or you reach out to them. You just say you're a Revit Kid viewer, and you get a discount from us. If you're ever building your own system and you want some specs, you can reach out to me, Buck at BIMBOXUSA.com. Happy to help you spec systems or give you advice on anything. I have computer parts all behind me and to the side. I cleared it up a little bit for this episode.
I could have been back there. Would have been fine.
as far as what we do at BIMBOX, if you have a company or your company's looking for things, we have a fantastic opportunity. You get one of our systems, spec it out however you want. 30-day program. You buy it, you keep it for 30 days. Regardless of what the reason, you don't like it, you send it back, you get your money back. We're the only company out there that actually has that. So you test it, you try it, you feel it, evaluate it, and send it back if you don't like it. So our performance, we guarantee it, we commit to it, and that's our commitment to y'all. The best systems out there. And really proud of that, man. Love the AEC and a huge fan of Jeff's show. I tell you, I told my parents, and my dad was like, "No way!" And I was like, "I've done AU broadcast. I've done, we have a podcast, the Content Crew," and he was excited about this. I was like, "That's so great.
Funny. That's awesome." Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing it. There are a couple questions in here, and I've gotten this a couple times too. Is folks outside of the USA? I know that you mentioned, all 50 states. Is there a plan or a way to service anyone outside of the USA for BIMBOX maybe in the future, or is that just sort of maybe one day sort of thing?
So currently the roadmap for the app is going to be Canada. We're going to Canada
Okay,
next. We
got
were
it.
planning on doing that last year, and then COVID hit. So
Oh,
like
well,
we
yeah.
had this awesome plan. 2019, we were going to buy 2,000 processors and get ready to go to Canada, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, right in the gut.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we're working right now. Canada during the time period put all kinds of crazy electronic restrictions
Mm,
on components to where you can't change RAM,
hmm.
or else you have to get it recertified through their system. So we're working through getting our system certified right now,
Hmm.
and then we'll be making that transition north, and then potentially probably what is it 21, 22, 23, maybe going overseas to Europe would be the next
Awesome.
move for us.
Great. There's a couple Australian guys. Sorry, you guys may have to wait a little while. I don't know.
Well, and that's not that a lot of Aussies call us, man. I look before I took on my partner, I had a couple systems in London, and we'd have a problem, and I was jumping on a flight Friday night to bring a new system Monday
we're
morning,
gonna
and
we're gonna be
as much
smuggling bin
fun,
boxes to New
yeah,
Zealand and Australia. Just
no,
tuck them in a cargo plane. So that's awesome.
right,
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thank you, Buck, for joining me. Phenomenal.
always,
As I mentioned, guys, this is gonna be the last one for a little while. Keep an eye on Twitter. Keep an eye on YouTube. I will be still posting, edited content, not live streams, and then I'll be back live streaming before you know it. So keep an eye out for that. And when I come back, I won't be in my master bedroom anymore. I'll be in my new office, the new BIM After Dark Studios, which I can't wait to show you guys, where I will finally have my BIMBOX desktop back out from under the dust sheet
shame,
and be able to
it's a
use it.
shame.
I'm so excited for it. I actually took the sheet off it today because I'm gonna build the desk tonight, and I was like, there it is, my
I'll
BIMBOX.
send you a 30 series to replace that
Oh,
2070. I
there,
got you.
there we go.
Yeah,
Nice, man. All right. And again, guys, if you want to check out all previous 55 episodes, head on over to live.bimafterdark.com. Head on over to bimbox.bimafterdark.com to learn more about BIMBOX, and then email Buck. And thanks, guys. And we'll talk to everyone soon. So have a great week. Or month, I guess, if I don't see you before then, everybody. I may or may not jump on live every once in a while, so stay tuned with that. Buck, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
thanks, Jeff. Be good.
All right, see you guys later.